Richard Hathaway was born August 2, 1913, at Earlham's o' the Heights in Salford, Greater Manchester. At the age of 9, he and a friend, Leo Parks, while walking to a park, claimed they had an encounter with strange beings seemingly not of this earth. In this video, I will delve into this case, which has become known in UFO circles as the Hathaway encounter. Between March and April 2021, prominent UFO researcher Philip Mantle was heavily involved in a 4-part TV documentary series about ufology, which was broadcast on an A&E affiliate channel. After each episode was broadcast, Mantle claims that he would receive a number of emails or messages on social media from people commenting on the series. Many were eager to share their own experience with him. One fellow who contacted him was a man named Stephen. It was in regards to his wife's grandfather, a man named Richard Hathaway, who, before he passed away, had written his own memoirs detailing his life in engineering. Included in these memoirs was a rather bizarre encounter that he had as a child, back in 1922. The story you are about to read is true, noted Hathaway in his memoirs. At this time, I lived with my parents and brothers in a small terraced house at the bottom of Prestwich Street, in the village of Earlham's o' Height, which overlooked the Irwell Valley. The A6 road bisected the village. Bank Lane ran down from A6 to Earlham's o' Height railway station, down in the valley. The road ended under the railway bridge. On the other side of the bridge were a couple of pastures, probably a quarter-mile in length and very narrow, known locally as the, quote, long fields. One could traverse these fields on the way across the valley to Prestwich, in which was located Heaton Park. Heaton Park boasted a magnificent lake in which were 5 islands. This place was a magnet in summer for many school children, and although about 4 miles from home, a goodly number of children from our side of the valley visited the park during the holiday times. Wednesday, the 2nd of August 1922 was fast approaching. Richard Hathaway, then 9, and his school chum, Leo Parks, also 9, were preparing for a day of fun. See, August 2nd was Hathaway's birthday, and he and Leo had planned, weather permitting, to spend the entire day at the nearby Heaton Park. They were intending to spend a couple of hours on the lake and explore the park's various islands. The plan was to set out at around 9:30 a.m. His mother had prepared sandwiches and bottles of lemon juice for the boys. Everything was perfect. That morning, the 2 boys set off down Bank Lane and immediately noticed that there was a mist in the valley. It seemed to be thicker over the long fields, but they didn't think much of it at the time. When we were well in the fields, we were amazed to see in the mist a very large cylindrical-shaped object, rather like a long pipe with cone-shaped ends very much like the nose of the Concorde plane. We thought at the time that it was probably something to do with the nearby Agecroft Pit or Colliery, a regular haunt of ours, so we decided to investigate. As the 2 boys got closer, they saw that it appeared to be resting in mid-air, about 3 or 4 feet above the ground. As they came around the end of the object, they saw that there were a lot of holes, about 12 inches in diameter in the end cone, and several tundish-shaped objects beneath the main body. They also noticed a suffused light that came from the underside. We felt no fear and decided to approach closer. When about 20 feet from the structure, we saw a large door slide open and people moving inside. They were about 5 feet 6 inches tall and dressed more or less identically in 2-piece suits with tunic collars, except that the clothes were in many soft colors. A few wore a headdress resembling a small turban. It was easy to observe that these were 2 sexes. One looked more gentle, and I thought of these as ladies. The men looked sterner, but still gentle and kindly in appearance. They were all slim in build, and some of both sexes had distinctive white rings around their sleeves. which both Leo and I took to be some kind of rank. Their faces and hands looked delicate, their faces being oval in shape, with large eyes and ivory skin, very pleasant and slightly oriental in appearance. 2 people, one of each sex, came to the large opening and beckoned us to come closer. I personally felt no fear, and later Leo said that he also felt no fear. As we approached, we felt we were walking up a ramp, although we saw nothing. As they stepped inside, they were shocked when one of the figures, a lady, addressed them in English. "Welcome, Richard and Leopold, to our ship." The 2 beings then took them by hand and showed them around the large room in the center of the craft. There were a number of control panels, which would be called consoles today, people reading instruments and others lounging around on the couches and tables. They told us this room was a common room, and that each person on the vessel had a small private lounge-cum-bedroom. The 2 guides then took them into a small room and sat them down in front of a screen, which appeared to be projecting images of their insides onto the screen. They did not assault us in any way. They then took us on a tour of other rooms, including their own private quarters. Each of the private quarters comprised a lounge with a table, a couple of chairs, working desk, bookcase, and various other bits and pieces. There was also a large screen on which country scenes were being projected. We recognized some of our own immediate surroundings. A curtained-off alcove contained control gear, which we were informed were for driving, navigating, and steering the ship. Other rooms were for controlling their armaments. Most of the control gear was way over our heads, and, as I recognize now, consisted of push buttons, indicator lamps, digital and analog instruments, mimic diagrams, and screens showing the actual operation of the particular plant being controlled. They told us the prime movers for the electrical generators were nuclear fusion devices, as opposed to nuclear fission devices, which the authorities on this Earth would probably use for providing their energy sources in about the next 50 or 60 years. They said their system was intrinsically safe, whereas the system which would be used on Earth would be flawed. When Richard asked what the ship was made of, the beings responded that it was a special ductile, incorrodible substance, which was mined on their planet, and when completed, it was many times the strength of steel. We asked how they knew our names when they asked us in. They said they knew by a system of thought transference they had perfected between themselves, and found out our names by intercepting our thoughts after we entered the ship. They pointed out that not many persons were actually speaking to each other, but were in fact communicating with each other by thought transference. We asked if it was their intention to make war on us. Their reply was definitely not. They said their planet was dying. The total number of people on their planet was now only 3 million, and they were looking for a planet similar to ours, but as yet unpopulated by humans. They thought our planet was overcrowded already, and the people in general were very aggressive to each other, as compared with themselves. They said that they came from another galaxy, but in the universe the number of galaxies was without end, and many other planets and other galaxies were inhabited by many strange creatures, living in unbelievable environments. Creatures from other planets from other galaxies, of unimaginable appearance, had been spying on each other, except for us, from time immemorial. They said that our Earth would start spying within 100 years. They said that they had visited this planet over 100 years ago. Their planet, they told us, was light years away, but they had perfected a system of place and distance transference, which accounts for millions of light years and hours. They could not enlighten us any further as the human brain was not sufficiently developed. Being just kids, Richard admits that he and Leo were, quote, overawed by what they had seen. They did not ask any more questions. They were in a state of wonder. They gave us some fruit and a shoulder hug, and then sent us down to the outside. As soon as we left the ship, the great door closed, and the ship rose rapidly in the sky. We walked back to where the ship had been, but there was not a trace of it ever having been there, only a few cows and ourselves looking in wonder. Our day at Heaton Park was now off, so we decided to spend the rest of the day at the riverbank in Drinkwater Park, Pestridge Club. We decided to keep the encounter to ourselves for fear of being laughed at. I have not heard from Leo for the past 50 years, so I have decided to set the matter down in writing for the first time, as I am now 83 years old. They told him that in the next 50 to 60 years we would be using nuclear fusion. And this, he admitted, came true. They also said that we would be spying on the visitors within 100 years. And there are people that believe that the Pentagon has a secret program that monitors the activity of these visitors in our skies. In his write-up, Mantle was quick to point out that Hathaway was a man of impeccable credentials. At 14, he landed at the Metropolitan Vickers. Its factory in Trafford Park, Manchester, was one of the biggest and most important heavy engineering facilities in Britain and the world. He became a draftsman before getting more involved with the massive electrical engineering projects that were involved in power generation, railways, mining, and many other fields. Through his own perseverance, he succeeded in becoming a fellow at the Institute of Electrical Engineers. During World War II, Hathaway was involved in the development of minesweepers at sea, using systems involving high currents to produce surges of magnetism to detonate mines. At the age of 40, he made the move to NCB, or the National Coal Board, as Chief Electrical Engineer for the Wakefield and surrounding areas, where he was involved with improving the mine's electrical systems and designing and overseeing installation of mineshaft, winching systems, and pithead gear. He was also involved in the sad task of investigating mining explosions at Walton and Normanton collieries. Upon calling around, Mantle discovered that Richard was considered a proper gentleman, who was very precise, articulate, and not one to make up stories. Reading his memoirs, it seems he never spoke much about this event, but he must have thought about it a great deal. As time passed and he was getting older, he had the conviction to include this story in those pages, so that it would not be lost should the worst happen. Richard passed away in his very late 80s. I think the ship we entered that day in August 1922 would, on reflection, be called a UFO today. But at that time we had never heard of such things, and they were beyond our comprehension. I could not really analyze my feelings at the time, and for many years searched my mind for a reason for the encounter. Much later in life I accepted the fact that the great object was indeed not of earthly origin. This account is set down as it happened and is a true story. The reference to nuclear power words, fusion, fission, earlier in this article is my interpretation of what they told us. They did not use these actual words. Mantle noted that in Hathaway's memoirs, which were divided into two parts, the section marked "The Encounter" was far longer than any of the other items he covered. It was obviously of great importance to him. These, after all, were his own self-published memoirs, and the one I have seen was personally signed by him to his granddaughter. This goes to show that only a handful of people will have ever seen this account in writing before. Mantle found it interesting that the encounter coincided with Hathaway's birthday. As well, he noted that the two boys decided not to speak of what they had seen for fear of ridicule. The description of the creatures is very unique and very different from those reported today. The interior of the craft is also very different, especially the furniture. Richard Hathaway was 83 when he wrote it, but there are no signs of problems with his memory when writing his memoirs. For example, he even uses a word that I personally have never heard of before, that being tundish. Look it up and see for yourself what it means. We must remember that this story takes us back to a very different era. For example, children at his age, 9, did indeed trek a few miles on their own to play in the park. Mr. Hathaway would of course not have been exposed to science fiction stories on TV or the movies, and therefore could not have been influenced by them. There is, of course, no way that we can identify what exactly happened to Richard Hathaway and his friend Leo back in August of 1922. All I can say is that this encounter was important enough for him to make sure it was preserved for posterity in his memoirs. It's kind of weird that they would choose a couple of 9-year-old boys to confide in. Was Richard Hathaway and his friend chosen at random, or were they chosen because they were obviously intelligent, highly intelligent boys?